Welcome. I'm so pleased to see everybody here, colleagues, friends, relatives. It's kind of like a little wedding. It's great, except it was a little bit more work writing the book. I'm going to hand over to Alex. Alex, you're in charge of officially introducing me. Yeah.
Okay. So my role will be to guide us through the evening, ask some questions of Brenda. Hope she's ready.
I'm ready.
Brenda, so we've got your book here. It's called The Road to Somewhere. Basically, an account of your life up until now.
So it's a memoir, so I didn't tell everything. My roommate from college read through and she said, oh, you left that out. Oh, and you left that out. Oh, and you left that out. It's like, well, yeah, I'm not going to write everything. But it's an account of my life. It's the common thread. It's about how I grew up in a very small Midwestern town in the United States and what motivated me to leave, basically. Yeah.
Don't give too much away right now.
Right. Sorry.
All right. Why don't we start how your journey began? Why don't you read that section?
Yes. That is...
Do you need page 6?
Yes. All right. So this is about my year in Spain, which was the way I got out of my small town was to spend a year in Spain. 6 years earlier, on August 18th, 1979, 1 month after my 18th birthday, and 2 months following my high school graduation, I had boarded a plane for Europe. I, a suburban girl from nowhere, was headed for Europe. It was happening. My friends were packing their bags for Ohio State, Kent State, Purdue, Cornell, and a few other colleges. They had a set course of study ahead of them. 4 years of hard work at their desks, with some parties in between, then graduation, marriage, and some job they'd hold for the next 50 years. Not me. I was headed for pure adventure. The month preceding my departure, I was already walking down the streets of Seville in my mind. I could already detect the scent of orange blossoms from the trees lining the Guadalquivir River. The famous Torre del Oro, which saw the conquistadores depart for the New World, loomed in the distance. An experienced seamstress, I had even made a special outfit for Spain, a flowered blue and white wraparound skirt and a white long-sleeved V-necked cotton blouse, which I had labored over to get the neckline to lie flat. A special ensemble for a once-in-a-lifetime occasion. This was the first time I had flown anywhere. The first roll of film I shot on that trip was pictures of clouds from the plane window, much to the amusement of the middle-aged priest sitting next to me. I didn't care. What did he know of the uncontrollable thrill I felt on my first ever flight as I headed to my dream country? The endless blue sky and the giant billowy clouds beckoned me with the promise of newfound freedom and adventure. The elation I felt upon arriving in Spain and speaking Spanish to people would be to me what the Wright brothers must have felt like when their first plane lifted off the ground. I had spent years studying vocabulary and grammar, listening to endless tapes, taking countless dictations, and engaging in conversations with my teachers and classmates. But I'd never had a conversation with a native speaker, and I'd never used the language in a Spanish-speaking country. All at once, this training would be put to the test. And a test it was. After an exciting 8-hour flight on Braniff Air, the plane finally landed in Paris. Assisted by my mother, I had booked a flight to Paris, not to Seville, not even Madrid, which would have been at least in the same country. No, I booked a flight to Paris because it was significantly cheaper than flying to Spain. The travel agent assured us it would be no problem to travel from Paris to Seville. After all, it was just a few inches on the map. My mother and the travel agent had really hit it off, laughing and talking. The travel agent was nice. Therefore, her advice must have been sound. She told my mom that once I was in Paris, all I had to do was catch a train. Everybody knew Europe had a great train system. Unlike the US, where you had to fly or drive everywhere. This had all sounded reasonable to me, too, seated next to my mom inside the travel agency in suburban Cleveland. The reality was different.
Thank you. You did finally get to Spain, right? And you ended up taking immersive Spanish courses at the University of Salamanca. Do I have that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, you sort of hinted at it at the very beginning of this chapter, but what was it that you were trying to get away from?
So, yeah, that's a loaded question. No family members are present, so I'm good. Yeah, so I grew up in a very small Midwestern town, one of these typical American suburbs. And if anyone is familiar with American suburbs, you know that once you live there, you can't go anywhere unless you have a car. So you're stuck. And I was stuck. I'm from a family of 5. And all you do is count the days until you turn 16 and get a driver's license, because you just can't go anywhere. And even it's just so different from Europe. It's hard to imagine how nothing there is. Like, they sent these poor German students to towns in Kansas and Montana, and they're like, yeah, where's the Dorfkneipe? It's like, the what? Like, no, we go to church on Sundays. It's like, that's your entertainment? It's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, that's our entertainment. And when my German boyfriend came to visit me in my little suburb in Ohio, he announced to my mother, he said, oh, I'm gonna take a walk. She said, can I drive you somewhere? It's like, no, I'm gonna take a walk. It's like, well, we don't take walks around here. So yeah, he walked down the road and got attacked by the neighbor's dogs. And luckily he didn't get shot, but yeah, it's just a little different. So there was that, and I was just so bored that I wanted to go somewhere, and I was very good at Spanish, so that seemed like a likely thing to do. And I didn't have money to go to college, and I didn't really know what I wanted to study. I just wanted to learn Spanish. So I found a program for Spain, and that was it. So all my friends, as I read, they went to college, and I went to Spain. And it changed my life.
And in this chapter, you talk about walking down the street in your imagination, smelling the orange blossoms. Did Spain end up being that which you had imagined it to be?
Yes and no. So first of all, orange blossoms. No, in Seville in September, there are no orange blossoms. I think they come out in February. It was really, really hot. So I was absolutely enthralled by Spain and speaking Spanish, and all the things you saw in your language book suddenly came to life. I was like, oh my God, they actually drink café con leche. This is awesome. Or chorizo, you just go into a bar and all that stuff. It's like, oh, this is great. But I was a little surprised. I was on a program for Americans, and they were from all over the country, and they were all doing their junior year abroad. They weren't like me, fresh out of high school. And I quickly discovered that they weren't sort of nuts about languages like I was, because I wandered around with a notebook and wrote down all the words I learned, and they were drinking a lot. I mean, I also drank a little bit, but yeah. But they weren't nearly as passionate about learning the language. One of my goals was to somehow get away from all the Americans in my program.
And you did.
I did.
And you'll read that chapter where that happens now.
Yes.
Okay. It's 182.
Yeah. Brenda, I have a message for you. It was Nancy, the American coordinator of our program in Salamanca. It was early December 1979. Someone named Rosa called. They have a space in a group apartment. Here's the phone number. You can use the office phone if you want. 3 months of living in Jose and Pepita's apartment had convinced me I could do much better. I had come to Spain to immerse myself in Spanish, and sharing a room with a student from Minnesota and sharing a few sentences about my day with a middle-aged Spanish ama de casa did not fit the bill. To my delight, I found a spot in a group apartment with 4 Spanish girls, all friends from the nearby town of Arévalo. They had seen the handwritten note I had posted on the university notice board that I was looking for a room. I moved in and quickly made friends with this boisterous bunch. My new roommates got a big kick out of sharing an apartment with this blue-eyed, poorly dressed American girl with self-cut bangs. And now I had a whole apartment full of language advisors whom I planned to take full advantage of. Coming home from classes on Monday in my second week in the apartment, I asked for an explanation of an expression I had never heard before. My roommates immediately sprang into action. Sonsoles started to speak, but Rosa, the leader of the pack, brushed her aside. No, es más bien. No, it's more like. Toyi, who ranked second in the group, chimed in. Hija, ¿qué dices? Eso no se dice. Girl, what are you saying? Nobody says that. Rosa wasn't having it. Ah, que sí? Yes, they do. Amparo and Sonsoles, my two other roommates, joined in too, but by then I had lost track of the conversation and was instead focused on standing my ground. Quite literally, since the four of them had now formed a circle around me. It tightened as they spoke, and I found myself stiffening to resist the urge to duck between Rosa and Toyi and bolt for the door. My American sense of personal space was being perilously squeezed. They gesticulated with great enthusiasm, each talking louder than the other. An uncomfortable situation? Yes. But at the same time, it evoked the kind of feeling you get on a roller coaster. Scary, but exhilarating. And as soon as it's over, you can't wait to go back for more. There was a big construction site near the university that I passed every day to and from classes, complete with a whole battery of workers and the standard catcalls. The gist of what they called out was unmistakable, but I wanted to understand exactly what they were saying. ¿Qué son nalgas? What are nalgas? All four roommates exploded simultaneously. ¿Dónde has oído eso? Where did you hear that? It turned out that the genteel fellows from the construction site were commenting favorably on my posterior. My Drew roommates often disagreed on the meanings of different words, how they were used, or some other detail, and I would get caught in the flow of their banter as they surrounded me. Each time, I planted my feet firmly on the floor of this word-swept plain to prevent myself from being blown away by the force of the storm, enduring the barrage of words until they reached a consensus. We all paid into a common petty cash fund, El Fondo, to finance the butane cooking gas, and of course, our daily bread. I was astounded at the panic that broke out if someone discovered we were out of bread just when the bakery was about to close at 2 p.m. One of us would fish money out of the jar and rush downstairs at the last minute. My escape from the Americans was a complete success.
Nice. I'm going to summarize a little bit, some chapters in the book that build us up to the next section. After Spain, you studied in the US. You found yourself a German boyfriend. He prompted you to learn German, and you eventually moved here to the area.
Yes.
And soon after you arrived, it was time to put this newly acquired German language skills to use in finding a job with the help of your boyfriend's mother.
That's right.
Okay. Why don't you read the section where all of that happens?
Here's one for you. Ingrid handed me a small rectangular clipping of a classified ad from the newspaper. Ingrid was Michael's mom and on a mission to help me find work. They're looking for a native English speaker who also speaks German, French, and ideally Spanish too. You have all those qualifications. We were sitting at the kitchen table, poring over job ads. More accurately, I was drinking coffee and concentrating on being nervous, while Ingrid scoured the ads on my behalf. Just looking at them made my stomach turn. My first task in this new country was to find work. I was about to learn to appreciate German thoroughness and tenacity in the form of the painstaking efforts of Michael's mother, who was filling in for her son while he was busy with a full-time internship during the day. While I was paralyzed with fear and terrified by the thought of even looking at the job ads, she systematically checked every newspaper, spreading them out on the dining room table, highlighting and cutting out the jobs I was qualified for. The process was repeated every morning. In addition to fluent Spanish, I spoke decent French and was an excellent typist, thanks to an evening course at the YWCA. Nights in the office after hours spent typing up newspaper articles for practice would now serve me well. Why don't you give these a try? I'll help you write the application letters. Under her watchful eye, I typed up one application letter after another, following her exact instructions on how to format it, write the date, and most importantly, what to say. After many failed attempts and lots of wasted paper, German typewriter keyboards are slightly different to accommodate the umlauts. I managed to get it right. Within a few weeks, I had sent out several applications. Then the waiting began. But what were my chances? I had only just arrived a few weeks before from the US. How much credibility would that give me? Would they believe that I planned to stay? How much value did they place on my work experience in the US? Most nerve-wracking of all, would my German be good enough? These questions gnawed at me as I anxiously awaited the arrival of each day's mail. To my complete and utter surprise, I received a positive response within days. As a native English speaker who spoke other languages, I had a better chance on the job market than I realized. There was just one catch. They asked me to call to set up an appointment for an interview. Call? I had to call? This was going too far. Writing out the application letters was hard enough. Now they wanted me to make a phone call. How was I going to conduct a business conversation in German, on the phone, no less, even if it was brief? Together with Michael, I formulated the script for a standard phone call, complete with details on how to agree on what day and time would be best for an interview. I made Michael leave the room while I called. He waited around the corner, just out of sight. Then I sat and stared at the phone for a good 40 minutes, lifting up the receiver and putting it back down again. Heart pounding, hands sweating, I somehow managed to make the call without the telephone receiver slipping out of my sweaty hands and without forgetting every last word of my practiced script. The woman on the phone understood me perfectly, and to my great relief, I understood her too. It's traumatic just thinking about it.
I'd be interested in hearing so you had experience in Spain, and then you had your experiences here in Germany. Both countries are in Europe, but they're very different. Nonetheless, I'm wondering if there were any similarities or perhaps skills that you picked up in Spain that helped you become more acquainted with Germany more quickly, perhaps?
Yeah, so I think anyone who's lived abroad, I think a lot of people here are foreigners, you can appreciate, once you've lived abroad, you know that there's sort of a bit of a formula, if you will. There's so many things that are different. And of course, that applies to Spain and Germany. For one thing, it gave me, I think most people who've never learned a foreign language have no concept how incredibly hard it is. They go, I'll just take a few classes and I'll be good. It's like, no. You take a few classes and you forgot everything in chapter 1, so you have to go back and do it again. So that I learned that it just takes a really, really long time. It was also, so Spaniards, I think it's safe to say Spaniards are very different from Germans, right? They're very expressive and very loud and hugging and all this kind of stuff. So for me, I had to get used to the German culture. So as a Midwesterner, we tend to be on the side, the Germans say that Americans are superficial. We think we're friendly. It's just a matter, it's the same thing. It's just a matter of it depends on where you're coming from. So when I first got to Germany, it took me a while to figure out what was going on, because I had heard all the names of my husband's friends. I'm like, oh, nice to meet you. Grüß dich. It's like, okay. And I meet another one. Hi, at least, hey, hi. Grüß dich. It's like, nobody likes me. And then after, I don't know, friend number 7, 8, I was like, they're all doing the same thing. They're just like that. They don't do the, hey, American thing. It's like, okay. Yeah, when you it takes a while to reduce or change your expectations and not feel upset when someone reacts in a different way. But but the year in Spain definitely primed me for being open to whatever, right? I mean, that's the whole reason you go abroad, is to discover new things, and many of the things you never thought to expect, which is a big adventure, which I love.
That job, the telephone call, you got the job.
I did get the job.
The job. And I guess that also, for you, it proved that you were functional in the language. But then the idea of inclusion was a little bit more difficult, harder to attain.
Yes.
And I think you've got a nice chapter.
Yes.
I don't know if nice is the right word, but a chapter to read about that.
Yeah, it's about learning the language and how hard it is and how many things can go wrong. So I'd been in Germany a while, so I'll read that passage. It was New Year's Eve, and we had been invited to Lisa's party. Lisa was Michael's former girlfriend, who still had feelings for him. She tried to mask this, but it was nonetheless made for an awkward situation. There were about 12 people at the party, and I was the only foreigner. I had been in the country for several months and was feeling fairly confident about my German, but that was about to change. Sitting in a circle, everyone was drinking, laughing, and having a good time, except for me. I could follow a conversation with one person by interrupting or asking them to repeat, but a party situation was a whole different story. People mumbled, spoke quickly, threw in colloquialisms, and made jokes. I leaned forward, straining, eager to understand and be part of the crowd. I smiled when everyone else smiled, laughed when everyone else laughed, and tried my best to blend in. I couldn't ask them to explain every single time I didn't understand. That would have turned the party into more of a German class. Besides, I much preferred to be as invisible as possible, and continuously asking questions would have drawn attention to me. Suddenly, the guy next to me struck up a conversation in English. I breathed a sigh of relief. Someone I could talk to. You must be having a hard time not speaking much German. Yes, very. I speak some, but not very much. I'm still learning. After that, he turned away, refocusing his attention on the group. The little glimmer of feeling like part of the gang faded away as soon as it had come. I had no choice but to continue to pretend I was able to follow the group's conversation as best I could. People had started telling jokes, and I laughed along with everyone else. Then someone turned to me. Did you understand that, Brenda? Everyone had gone silent and was looking at me. My heart stopped. No. Then why did you laugh? Because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to shout. I wanted more than anything else to fit in, but I just couldn't follow the conversation. I could barely hold back my tears. It was 11:45, just before the midnight celebration, but I couldn't bear it any longer. I had to get out of that place. Michael made some excuse and we left. We headed towards the train, looking up at the firework-filled sky as partygoers began celebrating the arrival of the new year. People were drinking champagne, kissing, lighting firecrackers on the streets, and generally having a great time. I had nothing to celebrate. I just wanted to go home and not have to hear or speak this impossible language anymore.
Poor Brenda.
Yeah, it's funny. Once you learn the language, you're like, I can speak it. Yeah. And as I always say, when you know how to do something, it's always easy, right? But during those stages where you're learning, it's very painful. I think anyone who's trying to learn German probably knows this feeling of just basically getting a headache. So I have to get out of this place. It's just very, very hard to learn a language. So,
my throat hurt in the beginning.
Yeah? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then of course there's the what is it, schwul and schwul? It's like, don't say it. Say Luftfeuchtigkeit, and you're safe. Yeah. It's like, stay away from those words. We don't want to do the little mouths. Yeah.
No use.
No. Just say the no use. Yeah.
What? So the next day you wake up, it's January 1st. What made you want to go on?
Oh, well, maybe a little bit of alcohol. Yeah. No, I mean, you just have to keep on going, right? I mean, I was in this country. I was committed to learn the language. Just have to keep going. That's all you can do. Yeah.
In the chapter you just read, it had to do with fitting in. And I'd like to conclude with a section about fitting in, and I think it really fits well to this time of the year, the 5th season here in Munich, Oktoberfest, it's coming up.
Yes. So all the women in this room will be able to understand what I'm about to read. Yeah. Shopping for a dirndl. When I went shopping for my first dirndl, I was pleased to find my size in my favorite green. I emerged proudly from the fitting room. This is perfect, I gushed. The dirndl was stunning. My husband beamed. I was all set to buy it until the saleslady arrived. She cast a critical look at my bosom and shook her head. Tighter. It has to be tighter. She dashed off to find a smaller size. Oof, I thought. Okay. I obliged, putting on the smaller size, stuffing my bosom into it as best I could. It was an impossibly tight squeeze. I was popping out of the top of the bodice, and crumpled bits of my bra were visible. It looked ridiculous. I had thought dirndls were supposed to make you look sexy. The saleswoman took one look at me. You need a dirndl bra. She trotted off to find one. How had I managed to live in Bavaria for so long without even knowing about the existence of dirndl bras? Bitte schön, she said, preferring a lace-smothered, padded push-up bra with industrial-strength underwiring. It looked to me like something a courtesan from the 1880s might have worn. I obediently crammed myself into this contraption and then slid my dirndl back over it. Except now that my bosom projected up and out, I couldn't close the dress. It's a little tight. Can you help me with the buttons? I asked the saleslady when she came to check on me. I could barely breathe. My fingertips were red and tender from repeatedly forcing the tiny silver buttons into buttonholes because they kept popping back out. The saleslady didn't skip a beat. She firmly grabbed the open flaps of my bodice, pressed them together, and deftly buttoned it up. Now it had my ribcage in an iron grip. This was nothing short of a modern-day corset. Surveying me arms akimbo, she looked triumphant. Perfect. You look great. I sure did. Maybe because my waist had just been artificially cinched to be 3 inches smaller, and my bosom raised up to be a kind of platform. I felt like Scarlett O'Hara. My husband was grinning from ear to ear. I love it. I thought longingly about the flappers that women wore in the 1920s after they had trashed their corsets. But for nostalgia's sake, I agreed to get the tighter, smaller size. At least it would keep me from drinking too much beer, since there would be no room for it. I retreated to the dressing room to escape from my torturous outfit. Opening the buttons felt like letting the air out of a balloon, one small burst at a time.
Perfect. I hope you enjoyed this. I did.
So did I.
If you'd like to find out more, Brenda has some books here on the table. You'd be
And
happy
I
to
don't know if
sign
anyone has any questions or comments.
that too.
I know we have a lot of people. Yes? Oh. Thank you. Thank you. Beverly,
So could you give me sort of one thing you would say is positive and one thing you say is negative? If you were to compare this, your adventure pre-social media, pre-digital age of leaving a country, learning the languages and things, to what young people experience today?
That's a really good question. The difference between my experience now, or my experience back then, pre-social media, and what young people experience now, it's hard to actually fathom how huge that difference is. When I went to Spain, this was a long time, Spain was very much poorer than Germany back then, for example. It was a bit of a shock, and many people didn't even have telephones. And I shared an apartment with these students, and we didn't have a telephone. Nobody had a telephone. And people say, well, how did you make plans? Like, yeah, we say, you meet under the clock on the Plaza Mayor on Sunday at 12. And then you go there, and if nobody shows up, you say, guess I'll go back home. So that was completely different. And I also think back about how my mother dealt with that, because I had just turned 18, and she didn't even hear from me until I had been gone for a couple of months, because I wrote a letter. I think I would die but there were different expectations, right? And it really struck me once when I took a bus to Prague, and there was a young American woman in the seat ahead of me. And I heard her on the phone, and I realized who she was talking to. She was talking to her dad, and she was a student who was just about to begin a semester abroad. And here she had just arrived, and she was in awe. Prague is a stunning city, and she was describing the architecture as we drove by it on the bus. She was arriving, and I just thought that is so different from my experience, because I was completely alone. And I often wonder, obviously I have 2 daughters in Berlin, and you're in contact with social media and WhatsApp and all that. And when they first moved out, I may have checked my phone at night to see when they'd logged off of WhatsApp. So yes, I did that. And my mother, it's like, I guess, I don't know, I could have been lying in a ditch. It's like, well, someone took my passport. Hey, someone died here. It's just so different. Yeah, so I think there's pros and cons. I think it certainly makes you more independent when you know you're on your own. That's it. Yeah, good question, Beverly. Thank you. Diana.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
The first one is about the final structure of your book. Why did you start with Spain? Because it's not chronological, go back in time, your childhood.
Yes.
And the second question is, you write about different family members from your husband's family, like his parents and your daughters, and the school experience that they go through in Germany, cultural differences in the US. How much did you involve your family or ask for permission when writing about specific family members? And how did you balance protecting their privacy but still telling your story the way you needed to?
Yeah, that's the ultimate question for someone. So someone who writes a memoir like you. So I'll answer the first question first. That was easier. So my book is structured. It's not chronological. There are flashbacks back and forth, and I came up with that structure because I think after reading many other memoirs, I think you're only really, if someone has a really interesting life, then you want to say, where did this person come from? What's their background? But I think if you read the background first, then I think it's not that interesting. After all, I did come from a boring Midwestern town. So I did that, and the year in Spain comes towards the end of my book. But I think by the time you reach that, I think maybe you're more curious, hopefully more curious about why that shaped me so much. So I hope that it works. But that's why I did that, because reading other memoirs who did flashbacks, I thought that worked better. Yeah, and again, the question for all memoirists, can you really write about all that stuff? That was very hard for me to do. The one person I think who comes out looking maybe not so great is my mother. Yeah, maybe there was more ill intent behind the words that came out. But I decided to write the book first, because if you read about how you should write a book, you should be authentic, and you should not lie. And there are no lies in the book. I changed almost all the names, but everything in the book is true. So I wrote about my mother the way I thought I should. And it was also, I must say, it was a very therapeutic experience to write about my childhood, because my mother was very, very unhappy, and my parents eventually split up. And going back and reconstructing the events made me realize as an adult why that happened. And that was a bit of a, it was it was sad, and it was also a relief. And it was very therapeutic, really, to put all those things, all those pieces of the puzzle into place. And then, unfortunately, I took a really long time to write the book. And by the time I was finished, my mother had passed away. And the other people in my book, there's a very difficult passage about one of my daughters. And I worked very closely with her on that passage. I said, you have to be good with this or I won't write it. And she read it, and she changed very little. So I'm very proud of her for telling her story like that, because she had some very serious difficulties in gymnasium. And my other siblings, with one exception, I sent them the entire manuscript, and I said, hey, this is my book. They didn't bother to read it, but they said, fine, that's great. It's like, they trusted me. It's like, all right then. And I have one sister that I'm not speaking to, her choice, so she didn't get the book. I don't think she'll read it though. Yeah, and I know that's something, I've gone to many writers' conferences, and this is what people who are writing memoirs always ask. Can I write this about my dad, my brother? It's like, oh my God. It's like, well, I initially left out some family conflicts, and my editor pointed that out to me. He said, Brenda, after you moved to Germany, what happened to your American family? I said, well, we kind of had these fights. You need to put that in. It's like, oh, I do? Okay. But you do, because it's reality, and that's what people want. They want to read an authentic story. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Thank you for this beautiful work. I was a stranger. I saw this on Meetup, so I had my first impression, and it's so wonderful to hear.
Thank you so much.
I want to know about how you found your voice. There you talk about memoir being this kind of voice, it's my voice, it's not quite the voice. And I wanted to know how you found, because now I have the image of you and your work side by side, and see this sort of you have a lively way of speaking and a lively way of writing. How did you kind of work on creating or lively writing?
Yeah, so a good friend of mine who's also an author, he said, yeah, you learn how to write books by writing them. You just have to, it's very intimidating. And I know many authors who are just starting out, and they're just like, how do I start? Start writing. And yes, I think I write the same way I talk. It's me. And I remember, I don't know if you know the American author Kurt Vonnegut. He's quite famous in America. He's not so famous here. And he said something that really struck a chord with me. He said, I'm from Indiana, so I should write like someone from Indiana. Why should I write from someone who's from Oxford or someone? It's just bullshit, right? If you're using fancy words that you don't really know. No, just write authentically. And then, of course, as we all know, you write the first draft. So I wrote a book. So I actually wrote about 30 books because I revised, and huge chunks flew out. I showed my first draft to some friends, and they're like, oh, all this stuff here is boring, but this stuff over here is interesting. So I threw out all the boring stuff, and it's a process. But then, yeah, as I said, you learn to write books by writing them, and you go into your flow. So are you writing books?
Sometimes.
Oh, go for it. Thank you for your feedback. Yeah. Yes.
Brenda, why did you choose to write a memoir instead of a book?
I think I always wanted to write, but I think I was a good writer when I was in high school. My English teachers always told me I was. And I always wanted to write a book, but I never dared to. Somehow I thought, I don't have anything interesting to say. And I guess after leaving my country and living abroad for a while, eventually I thought, maybe I do have something interesting to say. and some stories to tell, especially living here for so long and raising two daughters in a foreign school system and all kinds of, it just kind of worked out that way. I started writing a book about something else. I started writing a book about my in-laws' crazy adventure of building a house in Spain. Even though they didn't speak any Spanish, it's like, you're gonna do what? Crazy stories. That's really a book unto itself. And that's what I started to write, because my in-laws would come back and they would tell us these weird stories, telling the guy how to build a fence when you don't know the word for fence, you don't know the word how to build. I think the only word my father was aquí, maybe. He would just walk, aquí, aquí, no, aquí. It's like, all right then, the fence is going to be aquí, okay? And I thought, this is really funny. I'm going to write a book about that. And then it turned into a book about me, because that's the parts that people liked. I still may write the other book, but yeah, maybe some other time. Yes.
Hi. Yeah, this question might be very projecting, but I'm also from a small town in the West, and since living abroad, I've thought a lot about growing up believing stories that where I'm from is boring, or it's a non-place, or it's not worth talking about, thinking about, feeling anything about. I'm wondering if, since moving abroad, your opinion about where you're from had changed. Because we're constantly describing it to other people. People ask, what's Ohio like, or what's Nebraska like? And does it get boring saying it's boring? Or like, or have, the times you visited home again, have you seen it differently? That's a big question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, certainly, I think when you leave home and go back, your view always changes. One thing I definitely, after leaving home, I became much more keenly aware of how much I valued my family, because they weren't there. So I discovered that even though for many, many years, my family members all lived fairly close to each other, they would only get together when I was visiting, and I had to orchestrate it. And I know other people who have left America, and they share the same experience, that for some reason, their family members back home, it's like once you leave the country, they just kind of forget that you're there. And there are many big events in the family that they don't tell you about, and you find out later. Like I tell, there's a story in the book about a friend of mine. She found out that her father had open heart surgery a few weeks later by letter. He could have died, and they didn't even call her before she was extremely hurt, because she felt like she wasn't a full member of the family anymore. Yeah. So I have to say also, I think when I go back to my hometown, I also have a completely different take on it, because when I was growing up, there were 5 kids, and my mother was completely overwhelmed with such a huge family. So even though we were 20 miles outside of Cleveland, we rarely went into Cleveland. So when I go back, I'm like, I think I want to see some stuff now. So I think in anywhere you live, there are things to see. There are fun things and interesting things. But because my parents were my father was working 2 jobs, and my mom was depressed and overwhelmed, so she was just happy to get us through the day. When I go back, it was funny, because I just went back a few months ago, and I stayed with my niece, who lives closer to Cleveland than I did. And she took us all around Cleveland, and I was seeing all these things I had heard about during my childhood and never saw. It's like, well, that's the West Side Market. That's so cool. Wow, this is downtown. This is the monument to the Civil War dead. So it broadened my horizons, also with take on my hometown. And I think this is also quite common. When people go back to their hometowns, they kind of roll up their sleeves and say, guys, you're just sitting there drinking Kool-Aid or whatever. We're going to go see some fun stuff. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question at all. Yeah, thank you. Yes, Diana. Oh.
I think, I don't know what your ideal reader was when you were writing the memoir, but one thing I liked having read it is I felt like it was almost for like a multicultural reader who may be familiar with some cultures but not others. Like sometimes you maybe explain Germany to the Americans, like in the passage right, we're talking about the umlauts. But then, I don't I feel included, but not fully included, but also not left out. And I think you do a great job at shifting perspectives also as an author. And one scene I particularly love mine is when you go with your daughters to the US and they speak perfect American English, but they don't know the TV shows that other cousins in the US are watching. They know the German TV shows. And I feel like you're constantly changing the perspective a bit, and your own perspective shifts. So how did you work on that from like a narrative technique perspective?
I think it kind of, I built it as I went. Because yeah, that's when you know, to go to all these writing workshops. I mean, anyone who writes a book, it's all this online stuff. You could just drown in these webinars. And they say, no, know your reader. So like, who's my reader? It's like, I think it's an American. Then again, maybe it's a German. So I decided basically to do exactly what you said, to explain things. Because I've had someone read the parts about my childhood in the Midwest. I was like, oh, well, this is stupid. This was my childhood. It's like, well, yeah, that's what it's like growing up in the Midwest. But I decided I wanted to include both perspectives, so that someone in America could read it, and like all these things about. Yeah, there's a part where I talk about how real estate is just so different here. I mean, especially in Germany, you walk around and you say, "Oh, a bomb fell there." It's like, "Oh, a bomb fell over here." And a bomb fell over there. And when I noticed this when I go to countries that haven't been bombed, like, wow, no bombs. And I say that sometimes in the States. I say, yeah, you have no idea. You're so lucky. No bombs fell here. So I think it's useful to explain this. What's it really like to live in Germany, right? And for Americans, a lot of Americans don't leave. Many of my family members, they don't know what to ask me. It's like, how do you like Germany? It's like, it's nice. Any other questions? No. Can't think of anything else to ask. It's like, all right then. So I would love it if Americans reading the book would get more of a sense of what it's like to leave your country and to integrate somewhere else, especially because America is a land of immigrants. And it is so hard to leave your country and go live somewhere else. It's just really hard. And I think, especially in America, because there are so many immigrants, you just get used to it, right? I mean, where I grew up, we had people from Poland, from Italy, from Japan. It's like, oh yeah, you know, it's like, or we had some Hungarians. Yeah, well, they fled Hungary in 1956, right? When the Russians invaded. That was really rough, they left everything behind. But Americans kind of, because it's like, oh no, they're here to be part of us. But it's really hard. So I would love it if Americans, especially the ones who never leave, if they gained a bit more understanding and empathy for that. Yeah. Yes. Back there? Yeah?
Yeah, congratulations on your memoir. It's really inspiring and after the whole time and sort of explore your. I'm wondering, were there any points you were really frustrated with the local differences integrating into Germany apart from that kind of figure? And yeah, like, have you ever had real estate nights and you forget it as you move here?
So, yeah, I think when I first got here, again, this is pre-internet, pre-everything, I was really very, very lonely. I was very lonely, and I worked in an office. The job was really interesting. I worked for the International Basketball Federation. It's like, what? They used to be here in Munich, and it was totally interesting. But there was nobody in the office that was my age, because you think of, you know, where do you meet friends? You meet them in the office, right? You meet if you're in college, you know, your college roommate or whatever, blah. Yeah, but then you start working, and there were like 12, 15 people, and nobody was my age. And I couldn't find any connection. I was like, well, and I also learned, I read a statistic once that most Germans, not all, but most Germans don't leave the area where they grew up. They stayed within, I think, 50 kilometers of where they were born, and then they hang out with their gymnasium friends. So they've got this I don't know, this toolkit of friends that they keep for life. And it's hard to penetrate that. It's like, well, I'm sorry, I didn't go to your school. Will you be my friend? It's like, doesn't work that way, right? So the way I combated that, I thought, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to meet people. So I joined all kinds of clubs. There's this American-German club. I joined that, and I organized events. I organized a Thanksgiving dinner. I took aerobics classes. I took French, everything to just try to meet people. Oh, and I also organized a Spanish Stammtisch, which was very interesting because I felt my Spanish was much better than my German when I first came here, and I was kind of longing for Spanish. So I put a little ad in the Süddeutsche Zeitung for a Spanish Stammtisch, which is, if you don't speak German, it's this regular get-together. And it was great. I got like someone from Peru, a lady who had lived in northern Spain for many, many years. It was really interesting. And that helped me sort of get off the ground. It took a really long time to make friends. So that was rough. And I think in America it's faster because Americans move around a lot. So if you're new in a company or new in a neighborhood, there's other people who are new too. So there's just more fluidity. Whereas here, obviously that's not completely true, but they tend to stay put more. Yeah. There was another question somewhere. Grace?
Do it again?
Pardon me?
You do it again.
Oh, that's a loaded question. So yeah, you get the question, would you ever move back to America? It's like, no, I don't think so, not now. I think when you leave your country, you change, right? You're like a hybrid. And I talk about that in the book. You go back and you're like, let's open the windows. It's really stuffy in here. It's like, why are you opening the windows? It's stuffy. We have air conditioning, Brenda. We need to say, no, we need fresh air. No, we don't. It's like, okay. Or yet you change, right? I mean, you're also from a different country. And then you realize like, oh crap, I'm not the same as I used to be. Or then I had this huge shock when I went into a restaurant and the waitress, I was ordering and she looks at me and she goes, "You're not from around here, are you?" I said, and my sister's like, oh. It's like, I'm from Ohio. She goes, "You talk funny." It's like, I talk funny? What do you mean? She goes, "Yeah, you have an accent." I'm like, I do not have an accent. Yeah, and then I went back to Ohio a week later, and I got the same thing. "So where are you from?" I said, "From here." It's like, "Oh, well, how come you talk funny?" I said, "Oh my God." But then it's like, okay, so I talk funny. So yeah, I'm from here, but I'm not from here anymore. And I think if I imagine erasing the decades that I've lived here and just going back to my hometown, it's like, oh no, that would be terrible. I couldn't stand that. And my passion is languages. They're not interested in languages in America. I don't know what I would do. They all speak English over there. So I don't know what I would do for a living. Yeah, luckily I can't make that decision. So anyway, I'll just have to leave it at that, Grace. Would you do it again? Yeah? Okay, there we go. Husband sitting across the table. Okay, great.
Should we go over to the book sales?
I think we should. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
So I want to thank everybody for coming. It's been so nice. Thank you for your comments. Right at 9 o'clock.